The night was moonless. A thick blanket of black pulled over the sky. Elder Marius, his steps slow but sure, led a small procession to the very edge of the ashen peaks. Behind him, 6 torchbearers walked, their flames a frantic dance against the oppressive dark. The flickering light caught the bundle in the elder's arms. A baby girl, just 7 days old, wrapped in white linen that would soon be a canvas for soot and ash. "The omens have spoken," Elder Marius announced. His voice, though cracked with the weight of years, was firm, steel-edged with conviction. "The drought will end. The blight will lift from our crops, but only when the Sky Lords are appeased." He looked down at the child. "This child, born under the crimson moon, is marked for them." It had been 3 generations since the village of Mistfall had resorted to such an ancient, brutal remedy. But desperation is a powerful motivator. It had clawed its way into their hearts, driving them back to forgotten rites. No one spoke for the child. Her mother was gone, lost in the fever of childbirth, and her father. Her father had fled, a ghost disappearing into the woods rather than witness this terrible ceremony. He couldn't bear to watch his own daughter become a sacrifice. They finally reached the altar, a cold, flat slab of stone marking the boundary. Here the world of humans ended, and the realm of the phoenixes began. Beyond this point lay treacherous volcanic slopes, perpetually shrouded in smoke. Sometimes, if you stared long enough, you could catch a glimpse of fiery wings slicing through the haze, a terrifying and beautiful sight. "We offer this child, Ilara, to the Sky Lords," Marius intoned, his voice echoing in the unnerving silence. He carefully placed the infant on the cold stone. "May her life sustain our own." As the small group retreated, the baby didn't cry. It was as if, in some deep, unknowable way, she understood that her tears would change nothing. One by one, the torches vanished down the mountain path, their light swallowed by the distance, leaving Ilara utterly alone under the vast, empty canvas of the night sky. Hours crawled by. The mountain air grew teeth, biting with a sharp cold. And it was then, deep within his territory, that Talon felt the disturbance. The ancient Phoenix Lord had seen 7 centuries pass. His feathers were no longer the brilliant crimson of his youth. They had deepened into a burnished gold, streaked with the black of obsidian. He had witnessed countless human offerings left to die on this very altar. He found the practice distasteful, barbaric, but never before had he felt it was worth his intervention. Humans had their own cruelties, yet something about this one, something pulled him from his perch. Perhaps it was the profound stillness of the child, an unnatural calm in the face of certain doom. Or maybe it was the strange resonance he felt in the air around her, a faint hum of energy that was both foreign and familiar. Talon circled high above, a silent specter in the dark. His massive wings cast flickering shadows over the stone as he descended. The infant lay motionless, her skin already taking on the faint blue tinge of the cold. But as the immense heat radiating from his body washed over her, her eyes fluttered open. And what eyes they were! They were an intense, liquid amber, so bright they seemed to hold embers of a living fire within them. "You are not afraid," Talon whispered. The words formed in the ancient language of flame, a sound like crackling wood and rushing air. He expected no response, of course. She was just a human infant. But the child's fiery eyes followed his every movement with an uncanny, intelligent awareness. Against all wisdom, against the ancient laws of his kind that forbade meddling in the affairs of mortals, Talon made a decision. It was a choice that would ripple through time, changing destinies he couldn't yet foresee. With talons that could shatter rock, he gently, carefully lifted the swaddled bundle from the altar. He knew the Phoenix Council would object, their voices rising in a chorus of outrage. His own mate, Sora, would call him a fool, blinded by a moment of sentimentality. But something about this tiny human child spoke to him of destiny, of a thread in the great tapestry that he was meant to grasp. "They cast you away, little ember," he murmured, his voice a low rumble as he soared toward the fiery heart of the aspen peaks, the baby held securely against his warm chest. "But perhaps you were meant for fire all along." In his mountain eyrie, nestled within the caldera of a dormant volcano, Sora waited. Her magnificent ruby plumage was ruffled with concern the moment she saw what he carried. "Have you lost your senses, Talon?" she demanded, her voice sharp as obsidian shards. "A human child cannot survive here. The air is too thin, the heat too great. It will perish before the next sunrise." Talon didn't argue. He simply placed Ilara gently in a nest woven from warm, soft ash. "Look at her eyes, Sora," he urged. "Just look. She carries the fire within." Reluctantly, Sora peered down into the nest. The baby, warmed by the enchanted ash, blinked up at the colossal, glittering creature above her. Then she reached up a tiny hand, her fingers brushing against Sora's iridescent breast feathers without the slightest hint of fear. A flicker of something, astonishment perhaps, passed through Sora. The tension in the great phoenix's posture softened. She looked from the child's fearless amber eyes to her mate's hopeful gaze. "If she survives the night," Sora conceded, her voice no longer sharp, but filled with a grudging wonder, "then it will be the will of the flame." As the first rays of dawn broke over the jagged peaks, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, baby Ilara slept peacefully. She was cradled in living fire, a gentle, nurturing warmth that surrounded her but did not burn. And far below, in the village of Mistfall, a soft drizzle began to fall. It was the first rain in months. The drizzle turned into a steady downpour, and the villagers poured from their homes, faces turned to the sky, celebrating their deliverance. They cheered for their elder, for their traditions, for the sacrifice that had saved them. They never suspected that their offering hadn't been an end, but a beginning. Their sacrifice had not been taken. It had been adopted, and high above, in a cradle of fire, a girl named Ilara had found her true family. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this story, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next adventure. See you in the next video. 15 years. A blink of an eye for the ancient ashen peaks, but a lifetime for a girl growing up amongst legends. This is the story of Ilara. 15 years ago, she was just an abandoned infant, left to the mercy of the volcanic slopes. But fate, or perhaps the fire itself, had other plans. She was found not by humans, but by Sora, a wise and ancient phoenix who saw not a fragile human, but a spirit as wild as the flames she called home. 15 years passed like wind-swept embers. Ilara grew, not in a cradle of wood and wool, but in a nest of ash and warmth. Her skin, once pale, was now kissed golden by the perpetual heat of the volcanic vents. Her hair, a cascade of copper and auburn, flowed down her back like a river of fire, a testament to her unique upbringing. Her amber eyes held a special intensity, flickering with an inner fire whenever her emotions ran high. "Higher, Ilara! Feel the thermal currents!" The voice of Talon, her boisterous phoenix brother, echoed across the sky. They were soaring high above the peaks, dancing on the invisible rivers of warm air that rose from the earth. Ilara wasn't a phoenix. She couldn't transform into a creature of brilliant flame. But that had never stopped her. Strapped to her arms were wings of her own creation, lightweight obsidian frames meticulously covered with molted phoenix feathers, a gift from her family. She banked and dove, her movements so instinctual, so graceful, that even the eldest phoenixes watched in silent admiration. The sky wasn't a place of fear for her. It was her playground, her sanctuary. "I can feel the storm front approaching from the east," she called back, her voice clear and strong on the wind. She had learned to read the sky, to feel its moods and predict its tempers, just as she had learned the language of her phoenix family. She knew no fear of falling, only the exhilarating freedom of flight. Later that day, as the setting sun painted the horizon in fiery hues of orange, red, and gold, mimicking the plumage of her family, Elara sat beside her mother, Sora. The old phoenix was preening her aging feathers, a quiet, contemplative ritual. "You've grown quiet these past moons, my little ember," Sora observed, her voice a soft, melodic trill. The initial reluctance she'd felt at raising a human had long ago melted away, replaced by a fierce, protective love. Elara traced patterns in the warm, soft ash with her finger. "I dreamed of the human village again," she confessed softly, "of faces I've never seen, yet somehow I know them." Sora's magnificent feathers rustled with a sudden unease. "Humans abandoned you, Elara. They would fear you now, a girl who runs with phoenixes, who soars on wings of firebird feathers." "I know," Elara sighed, a familiar ache in her chest. "But something calls to me, a voice from beyond our peaks." What she didn't tell Sora was how this calling had grown from a faint whisper into a persistent hum in her soul. She didn't mention the secret flights to the edge of Phoenix territory, where she'd perch on hidden ledges for hours, watching the human sky hunters. She watched them ride their clumsy gliders, pale imitations of true flight, and felt a strange mix of pity and fascination, and she kept her biggest secret closest to her heart. She had discovered, quite by accident, that her unique upbringing had given her an extraordinary gift. She could understand not just the complex calls and songs of the phoenixes, but the languages of all winged creatures. From the mighty griffins that occasionally passed through their lands to the smallest sparrow chirping on a branch, their voices were as clear to her as her own thoughts. That evening the clan gathered for the dusk chorus. Their voices rose in a powerful harmonic fire song, a melody so potent it shimmered visibly in the twilight air, a cascade of sound and light. It was a song of community, of home, of shared flame. But as the chorus reached its crescendo, Elara felt a disturbance at the very edge of her awareness. A sharp, jarring note of desperation and smoke, something entirely foreign to their sacred lands. Driven by an instinct she couldn't explain, she slipped away from the singing circle. She followed the feeling, her bare feet silent on the cooling rock, until she found its source. A crashed sky glider, half buried in a field of jagged obsidian shards. Its wooden struts were splintered, its canvas wings torn to ribbons. And beneath the wreckage lay a young man, a human, unconscious, a dark gash bleeding on his forehead. A trespasser. Phoenix law was absolute. Intruders were to be driven out or left to the unforgiving mercy of the mountains. Every rule she had ever learned screamed at her to turn back, to leave him to his fate. But she couldn't. She knelt beside him, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. His face was angular, framed by dark hair tousled by the wind and the crash. A pendant of carved jade hung from a leather cord around his neck. It was a hawk in mid-flight. He was one of the sky hunters, though younger than the others she had watched from afar. His eyes fluttered open. They were the deep green of a forest after rain, clouded with pain and confusion. As his gaze focused on her, on the girl with fiery hair and ember eyes, she saw not fear, but pure, unadulterated surprise. "Am I dead?" he whispered, his voice hoarse. His words were in the human tongue, a language she had only ever heard from a distance, yet understood perfectly. "Are you a spirit of the peaks?" The foreign words felt strange and clumsy on her own tongue as she replied, her voice barely a whisper. "I'm no spirit, but you will be if the Phoenix Patrol finds you." He tried to sit up, but a sharp wince of pain stopped him. "Phoenix Patrol, the Firebirds are just legends, stories for children." In the distance, Ilara heard the sharp, piercing calls of the patrol. The dusk chorus was over. The search for the intruder had begun. "Not legends," she said, her voice filled with an urgency that surprised even herself. "Can you move? We have to hide you, now." She helped him to his feet, his arm slung over her shoulder. His weight was unfamiliar, his warmth different from the searing heat of a phoenix. She guided him, stumbling through the sharp obsidian field, toward a small, hidden cave she used for solitude. Every step was a betrayal of Phoenix law, a risk to the only home, the only family she had ever known. Yet, as he leaned against her, a strange and powerful feeling bloomed within her, a sense of connection she had never felt before, not even among the phoenixes who had raised her with such unwavering love. "I'm Rowan," he murmured as they finally reached the cool shadow of the cave entrance, his breath ragged. "Ilara," she replied. And as she spoke her name to another human for the first time, it sounded different. It sounded new. Behind them, the calls of the Phoenix Patrol split the twilight sky, growing closer. The search was on, and Ilara, the girl raised by fire, had just invited a storm into her world and hidden him in her heart. Thank you so much for watching. What do you think Ilara should do? And what secrets does Rowan carry with him? Let me know your theories in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story, please hit that like button and subscribe for the next chapter of Feathers and Flame. We'll see you in the next one. For 7 long days, a secret pulsed within me. A double life I led under the watchful eyes of the ashen peaks. By day, I soared through the skies with my phoenix family, the sun warming my feathers, my laughter echoing theirs, pretending everything was the same. But when twilight painted the mountains in hues of purple and orange, I would slip away. My destination was a hidden cave, a sanctuary carved into the rock, where Rowan, the human who had fallen from the sky, was slowly recovering. Each night, I brought him healing herbs and cool water from the mountain springs. I would sit with him, listening as he painted pictures with his words, describing a world I had only glimpsed from a great height, a world beyond the familiar crags of my home. On the 3rd night, my curiosity got the better of me. In the corner of the cave lay the shattered remains of his glider, which I had painstakingly salvaged. "Your glider?" I began, tracing the splintered struts with a fingertip. "How does it work? There's no living flame, no inner fire to give it lift." Rowan, propped against the cave wall, managed a weak smile. His strength was returning, a little more each day. "It's not magic," he explained, his voice still a bit hoarse. "It's science. Understanding wind patterns, using lightweight materials, and knowing how to angle the wings to catch the air just right." I tilted my head, intrigued. "It's not magic that keeps phoenixes aloft either," I countered. "It's about understanding the language of the air, the whispers of the heat rising from the earth. It's a conversation." Our nights became filled with these debates, 2 different worlds colliding and finding common ground. I learned he wasn't a warrior, as I had initially feared. He was a sky hunter, but not of creatures. His people were prospectors, harvesting rare minerals from treacherous mountain peaks, using their gliders to navigate the dangerous air currents that guarded the heights. He had been chasing a rich vein of sun crystal, venturing too close to our territory, when a sudden, violent thermal updraft had shattered his glider and sent him spiraling down. On the 5th night, as I was carefully changing his bandages, his hand brushed against mine. The contact was brief, accidental, but it sent a jolt through me, a warmth that had nothing to do with Phoenix fire. It was strange, unfamiliar, and utterly captivating. "Why do you live among them?" he asked quietly, his eyes searching mine in the dim light. "The phoenixes." I hesitated, the old wound of my past reopening just a little. "They saved me," I finally replied, my voice soft. "When my own kind discarded me, They left me as a sacrifice at the boundary stones, hoping to appease the spirits and end a drought. Rowan's expression hardened, a darkness clouding his features. Those were superstitious, desperate times, he said, his voice laced with anger. The drought drove people to do terrible things. But that practice, it ended years ago. It stopped after a child was sacrificed, and then the rains finally came. People believed the offering had worked. I stared at him, the air in the cave suddenly thick and heavy. "That child," I whispered, the words catching in my throat. "That was me, 15 years ago." "Impossible," Rowan breathed, his eyes wide. You couldn't have survived." He trailed off, seeing the undeniable truth reflected in my gaze. The phoenixes had found me, and their fire had not consumed me. It had embraced me. After that, something shifted between us. Our conversations plunged into deeper, more intimate waters. I told him what it was like to grow up suspended between two worlds, human in form, but with the heart and soul of a phoenix. He spoke of vast oceans that met the sky, of sprawling cities that glittered like fallen stars, painting a universe so much larger than I had ever imagined. In that small, hidden cave, a fragile connection began to bloom, as delicate and new as the first unfurling of a hatchling's wings. The 6th night arrived, veiled in moonlight that spilled through the cave's entrance, silvering the stone. As we sat talking, Rowan's fingers found mine, not by accident this time, but with a gentle certainty. They laced together, a perfect fit. "I never believed in fate," he murmured, his voice a low vibration that I felt through our joined hands. "I thought we made our own paths, but crashing here, meeting you, now I wonder if some greater force wanted our worlds to collide." My heart hammered against my ribs. I should have pulled away. My loyalty was to my family, to the phoenixes who had given me everything, but I didn't. Instead, I leaned closer, drawn by an invisible current. "Talon, my father, he says that nothing happens without purpose in the world of wind and flame." Then, our lips met. It was hesitant at first, a question asked and answered in the same breath. Then it grew with a certainty that stole the air from my lungs. I had never been kissed. I had never even thought about it. The sensation was nothing like the searing heat of phoenix fire, yet it burned through me with an intensity that was just as profound, just as life-altering. His arms wrapped around my waist, pulling me close until I could feel the steady, reassuring rhythm of his heart beating against mine. When we finally broke apart, we were both breathless, the world remade in that single moment. "I have to leave soon," Rowan said, his voice thick with emotion. "My settlement will assume I'm dead. They'll stop searching. But I will come back for you, Alara. I promise. If you want me to." The thought of leaving the Ashen Peaks, the only home I had ever truly known, was a physical blow. But the thought of never seeing him again, of this incredible nascent connection being severed forever, that cut deeper still. Our final night together came far too soon. By the 7th evening, his wounds had healed enough for him to travel. I led him through the darkness to a hidden pass, a secret route that wound through the mountains. "The winds are predictable here," I explained, my voice tight. "They will carry you west, towards the edge of human lands. From there, just follow the river valley east." He turned to me, his face etched with a longing that mirrored my own. He pulled me into his arms for one last, desperate embrace. "Come with me," he whispered, his plea a warm breath against my hair. "Come with me now." A war raged within me. Every instinct screamed to go, to fly into this new world with him. But another, older instinct held me back. "I can't," I choked out, the words feeling like a betrayal. "Not yet. There are things I need to understand first, about myself, about why I was chosen, why I can speak to all winged creatures when no other human can." We separated reluctantly, our fingers clinging until the very last second. 2 lunar cycles, Rowan promised, his eyes burning with intensity. When the blue moon rises, I'll be back at this very spot. Whatever you decide by then, I'll accept it. I stood there frozen, watching him become a silhouette against the stars until the night swallowed him completely. For the first time in my life, my heart was truly divided, torn between 2 worlds, 2 loyalties, 2 futures. A soft rustle of feathers broke the profound silence behind me. A voice, deep and familiar, but heavy with a disappointment that shattered my soul, spoke into the night. So this is where you've been disappearing to. I turned slowly, my heart sinking. There, his magnificent plumage glowing faintly in the moonlight, stood Talon, the great phoenix who had found me, saved me, and raised me as his own. "Father, I began, the words failing me. He cut me off, not with anger, but with a simple, devastating finality. "You've chosen," he said, his ancient eyes filled with a sad wisdom, "as I always knew you someday would. Thank you so much for joining me on this part of the journey. If you were captivated by Ilara's story, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss what happens next. I can't wait to see you in the next video." "I haven't chosen!" Ilara's voice rang out, a sharp, clear sound against the ancient volcanic stone of the Eyrie. She faced Talon, the great phoenix whose golden eyes seemed to hold the very light of the moon. "Why must there be a choice at all? Why can't our kinds just coexist?" Talon's gaze was heavy with the weight of centuries. "History, child," he said, his voice a low rumble. "A history written in fire and ash. Humans hunted us, coveted our regenerative flames for their own power. We were forced to retreat to these peaks, to draw lines in the earth and sky. The peace we have now, fragile as it is, exists only because of that separation." "But I exist between worlds," Ilara countered, her fists clenched at her sides. "I am the proof that the line can be crossed. What does my life mean if not that bridging the gap is possible?" Her words hung in the crisp mountain air, a challenge to the established order. In the days that followed, that challenge sent ripples of tension through the entire Phoenix Eyrie. The air crackled with debate. Some of the elder phoenixes, their memories long and unforgiving, called for Ilara's banishment. A human, they argued, who had harbored another human like Rowan, could never truly be trusted. Their loyalty was suspect, but others, those who had watched her grow from a lost infant into a strong young woman, defended her with fierce loyalty. They had seen the phoenix flame dance in her spirit, even if it didn't burn on her skin. Through all the heated arguments and suspicious glances, Sora, her childhood friend, remained her steadfast champion, a constant shield of support. Talon, however, grew increasingly distant. He seemed lost in the shadows of ancient memories, the old wounds of his kind reopened and raw. 2 weeks after Rowan's departure, the unthinkable happened. Disaster struck not as a storm, but on silent wings. Sky hunters, dozens of them, breaching the sacred boundaries of Phoenix territory. They flew in a tight, disciplined formation, their gliders reinforced with metal, their purpose chillingly clear. They carried strange, cage-like devices that glinted ominously in the high-altitude sun. "Sun crystal harvesters," Sora explained, her voice grim as the clan observed the invasion from a hidden ridge. The name itself sent a shiver down Ilara's spine. "They've discovered the largest deposit, the Mother Lode, and it lies directly beneath our sacred hatching grounds." "No," Ilara whispered, shaking her head in disbelief. "Rowan wouldn't do this. He wouldn't betray us." Talon, perched beside her, let out a sigh that sounded like grinding stone. "Perhaps not intentionally," he replied, his voice hollowed out by sorrow. "But humans have a word for what drives them: progress. And they often value it above all else, regardless of what they must destroy to achieve it." The confrontation was as swift as it was brutal. The moment Phoenix defenders swooped down to drive the intruders back, the hunters unleashed their weapons. They weren't spears or arrows, but nets of a fine-spun, shimmering metal. The nets didn't just capture. They conducted and trapped the Phoenix's own powerful flame energy, turning their greatest strength against them, rendering them helpless and grounded. Before the defenders could regroup, 3 were captured, their brilliant flames snuffed out inside the cruel metal webs. The others were forced into a painful retreat. That night, the Phoenix Council convened in an emergency session. For the first time in her life, Ilara entered the circular chamber, carved from the living stone of the volcano, not as a silent observer, but as a speaker. The cavern echoed with furious, grief-stricken calls for war. "We should burn their settlements to ash," cried Pyrax, a young warrior whose own mate was now a prisoner in one of those cages. His voice was raw with pain. "And prove we are the monsters they already believe us to be?" Ilara's voice cut through the rage, sharp and clear. She stepped into the center of the chamber, the firelight casting a defiant glow on her face. "Let me go to them. I speak their language. I understand their ways. I can negotiate." Scornful laughter met her proposal. It was a harsh, disbelieving sound. "Negotiate?" one of the elders scoffed. "With net throwers and cage makers? They understand only force." "No," Ilara insisted, her gaze sweeping across the council. "They are people who don't understand what they are truly doing. They see sun crystal as just another rock, a resource to be mined. They have no idea that it forms the very core of our unhatched eggs, the lifeblood of our future generations. How can they respect something they don't even comprehend?" The debate raged until the first light of dawn painted the sky. Anger fought against reason, grief against hope. In the end, a fragile compromise was reached. Ilara would be given 3 days. 3 days to attempt diplomacy before the full, devastating might of Phoenix Flame was unleashed upon the human settlements below. She didn't waste a single moment. She left immediately, but not on the warm back of a phoenix. She went on foot, crossing the invisible boundary into human lands for the first time since she was a babe in arms. The journey was a jarring assault on her senses. She was accustomed to the clean scent of ash and stone, the vast silence of the peaks. Down here, the world was an overwhelming cacophony of sights, sounds, and smells she couldn't name. The air was thick, the foliage dense and suffocating. After hours of walking, she saw it. The Sky Hunter's settlement, a sprawling scar across a green valley. It was a chaotic collection of wooden structures and canvas tents, all centered around a more permanent building of stone. And at its edge, glinting horribly in the midday sun, were the cages. 3 of them. Inside, the magnificent phoenixes were barely recognizable. Their brilliant flames had been reduced to pathetic embers, their proud heads bowed in utter despair. The sight felt like a physical blow, stealing the air from her lungs. Guards spotted her approach, and their shouts raised the alarm. Within moments, she was surrounded by armed hunters. Their expressions were a mixture of suspicion and raw curiosity. Who was this strange woman, with hair the color of dying fire, who had just walked out of the Forbidden Mountains? "I seek an audience with your leader," she announced, forcing her voice to be steady. She straightened her spine, mimicking the way Talon did when asserting his authority. A grizzled man with a captain's insignia on his jacket stepped forward. "And who exactly are you to be making demands?" he growled. But before she could answer, a familiar voice cut through the tense crowd. "Ilara?" Rowan pushed his way through the circle of guards, his face a disbelieving mask of joy and confusion. "What are you doing here? How did you even—" "You know this mountain witch?" the captain interrupted, his eyes narrowing. "She's no witch," Rowan replied instantly, his voice firm. "And yes, I know her. She's the one who saved my life when my glider crashed." The captain's suspicious gaze flicked from Rowan to Alara and back again. "The crash you claimed happened in the eastern ridges?" he pressed. "The crash that somehow led you to discover the mother lode of sun crystal in territory you weren't even assigned to scout?" A wave of guilt washed over Rowan's face as his gaze finally met Alara's. The truth of the situation crashed down on both of them. "I never meant for this to happen," he said softly, his words meant only for her. "I only reported what I found. I didn't know they would come in force. I didn't know they would do this." Alara felt something inside her crack. It wasn't quite betrayal, but the sharp, bitter pain of good intentions paving a road to ruin. But there was no time for personal hurt. 3 Phoenix lives, and the fate of 2 entire species were hanging in the balance. She drew herself up, her gaze locking onto the captain's. "Take me to whoever gave the order to capture living phoenixes," she demanded, her voice ringing with an authority that surprised even herself. "You have 3 days. 3 days before retribution comes on wings of flame." The council chamber fell silent as I told them everything, how I was left as a sacrifice, but raised by phoenixes. I warned them of the fiery vengeance that would come if they didn't release the phoenixes they held captive. "Preposterous," Guildmaster Thorne scoffed. Her eyes were cold, calculating. "Phoenix sentience is a myth. They're just animals, and their unusual properties could advance our technology by decades." I couldn't let that stand. "Would mere animals have a language, a culture, and a council chamber just like this one?" I challenged. "Would they send me, an ambassador, instead of just burning your entire settlement to the ground?" Rowan, a brave sky hunter who had seen the truth, stood by my side. He'd risked his entire career to support me. "I've seen their intelligence firsthand," he added, his voice firm. "And I've seen what they're capable of when threatened." The debate raged for hours. Most of the guild officers were dismissive, clinging to their old beliefs. But a few, the ones who had seen the captured phoenixes trying to communicate, their distress obvious, began to waver. Doubt was a seed, and it was starting to sprout. Finally, Guildmaster Thorne, backed into a corner, threw down the gauntlet. "Prove it!" she demanded, her voice sharp. "Prove these creatures are more than exotic animals!" That night, my heart ached as I sat with the caged phoenixes. I spoke to them in our native tongue, offering what little comfort I could. The youngest, little Alexia, her flame had almost gone out. For a phoenix, that's a death sentence. The others, Kieran and Meridia, were weak, but their spirits were still defiant. "Tomorrow," I whispered, making a promise to them and myself. "One way or another, this ends." At dawn, we put our desperate plan into motion. With Rowan's help, we gathered the entire settlement in the central plaza. Hundreds of curious and skeptical faces looked on. Then, standing before them all, I tilted my head back and let out a sound not heard in generations, a phoenix summoning cry. The response was immediate and overwhelming. First Talon appeared, my guardian, my father. His colossal form blotted out the sun as he descended. And behind him flew 12 elder phoenixes, including my mother, Sora. Their wings created a storm of heat and light. The humans gasped, stumbling back in a wave of fear and awe, but they didn't attack. Instead, they landed in a perfect silent formation around me. I stood my ground as chaos erupted. "Silence!" My voice, amplified by the plaza's acoustics, cut through the panic. "Watch and understand." What happened next was something no human had ever witnessed. The phoenixes began the sacred flame dance. It was a breathtaking display of aerial acrobatics, synchronized patterns of fire, and harmonic trills that resonated deep in your chest. It wasn't just a dance, it was a story. The story of their creation, their history, their soul. It was deliberate, undeniable art. This was not the work of mere animals. When the final note faded, leaving the crowd in stunned silence, I translated the message Talon delivered. He offered controlled access to sun crystal deposits, the very resource the guild craved in exchange for one thing: permanent recognition of Phoenix sovereignty. "They are willing to share," I explained to the astonished faces around me, "but never again will they be hunted or caged." Guildmaster Thorne, visibly shaken, her arrogance shattered by the raw, undeniable proof before her, finally agreed. The cages were opened. The weakened phoenixes were tenderly supported by their kin, lifted into the sky to begin their healing. In the aftermath, a new era began. Humans and phoenixes, for the first time, started building a framework for coexistence. I found myself once again caught between two worlds, but this time, I wasn't an outsider. I was the bridge. "I'm proud of you," Talon told me later, his ancient golden eyes soft. "You've fulfilled the purpose I sensed in you all those years ago on that altar." "What happens now?" I asked, my heart full but my future uncertain. "That," the great phoenix replied, "depends on what you want, daughter of both fire and earth." My gaze found Rowan, the man who had risked everything to stand with me. But how could I leave the sky? How could I leave Sora, Talon, the family who raised me? "Must I choose?" I asked, looking between them. It was Sora who answered, landing beside us with a gentleness that belied her power. "Perhaps not. Boundaries are changing. Why shouldn't you live between them, as you always have?" And so we did. Rowan and I built a home at the edge of Phoenix territory. It was a unique dwelling, half carved into volcanic stone, half built of timber, with wide platforms for Phoenix visitors. It became a place of learning, where sky hunters could understand the beings they once feared, and curious young phoenixes could learn about humans in safety. 2 moons after our journey began, Rowan and I stood on the highest platform of our home. Below, human and Phoenix representatives were finalizing a historic treaty that would protect both our peoples for generations to come. "Did you ever imagine this?" I asked, leaning into his embrace. "When you first crashed in the Ashen Peaks?" He laughed softly. "I was just hoping to survive. Finding you, that was beyond anything I could have ever imagined." As we kissed, 2 figures circled high above, their flames painting the night sky with streaks of gold and crimson. Talon and Sora watching over us. Talon had once told me that while I was cast away, perhaps I was meant for fire all along. He was right, but it was only half the story. I was meant for fire, and for earth, and for the sky. I was meant for the space where all worlds meet, where understanding can bloom like a flower from ash, and where love becomes the bridge that no ancient hatred can ever burn. Our journey had only just begun, but for the first time in centuries, the future was one we would all share. Thank you so much for joining me on this incredible journey. If you enjoyed this story, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss the next chapter. See you in the next video.